Hey, Spooksters, and welcome back to another episode here on Three Spooked Girls. My name is Tara, and as always, I'm here with my cool friend Jessica.
Hello.
Hello. And today is our final installment into our recap of American Nightmare. If you guys missed the other ones, go check them out. Or do what you want. I was like, listen to episode 3, kind of spoils the rest of the documentary, but do
It
what you want.
does.
It's fine. If you haven't watched it, it is on Netflix and highly, highly recommend. But we're going to go ahead and get into it in a second. But if you're new here, hello, welcome. Thank you for checking out the show. Returning Spooksters, welcome back. If you would like to hang out with us on social media, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, all the places. Our handle for everywhere is at Three Spooked Girls. We also have an amazing Facebook group. That's Three Spooked Girls Official. And literally the only reason I use that social media platform at all anymore. Just saying. Like, I don't go anywhere else. It's for that only. We have a happy little corner of the internet there, so come join us. Or we also have Discord. We kind of covered our bases and made all the things. So wherever you
All
want to
the
hang out,
things.
there's Spooksters there, which is so great. And if you're a reader, we do have our book club. When this comes out, it'll probably be close to when our next meeting is. So for February, we're reading London Seance Society and Slewfoot. Lots of fun stuff with that. So definitely come hang out with us if you like. We do the meetings in the Discord. So if you're going to come to book club, just go join the Discord. Makes life easier. We tried a couple other things, but we just didn't like that it limited us on our meeting time because sometimes we go over, sometimes we're like right at the time frame type of thing. But yeah, Discord's free and you literally, it's essentially just like Slack and Google Meet, like had a baby.
It's true.
If you think about it. So yeah, fun times. And if you would like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/Three Spooked Girls. For as little as $1, you get one bonus episode a month. 5 and up get ad-free episodes the day before. And soon we'll be getting our recap on season 2 of Gypsy Rose's show.
Ooh, I'm so
So
excited.
it's coming. It's coming. When this goes up, it'll be like middle endish of February. So I think the show premieres in maybe the end of March. I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but it's coming. So get ready, guys. So excited. I'm so excited. I can't even. Season 1 was a lot of fun, and we did drop the first episode on the main feed. So if you kind of want to see what that's about and whatnot, go ahead and just like scroll back a little bit. Did you find out?
March 10th.
March 10th. Oh shit. So
So
soon.
sooner.
Sooner. We only have in real time. We're the beginning of February, so we just have a little over a month. That's
I'm excited.
exciting. I know. Same. Oh my God. I love this. So
Hmm.
far, the only reality TV I've tricked Jessica into watching, but it's fine.
Hmm. Consistently.
I'll
Like the
find
whole
more.
season, not just be like, hey, go watch this one episode. I was like, that's
Yeah.
good. I'll check in the next time you tell me to.
But all right, enough about Gypsy. We're gonna just go ahead and get back into this. If there's anything I missed today, sorry, I don't know what my problem is, but everything's in the show notes. We have a link tree. Check it all out. Everything's there. Okay, so in episode 3, so part 3 is called The Others. Now we're at 10 weeks after Denise has been released from her kidnapper. And that puts us to June 5th, 2015 is the date that they show us. And a 911 call comes in from a residence in Dublin, California, which is super close to Jessica and only 40 minutes from Vallejo. So
Even
really
closer when it happened, like literally
right.
miles, like single digit miles away.
So a woman calls in and says that someone broke into their home and had taken their daughter. They said that the perpetrator had a laser pointed at them and told them to turn away. Obviously, so he isn't seen. The dad goes after him. Thankfully, the daughter's safe, the daughter's okay, but the intruder gets away. And the responding officer is Sergeant Chris Shepard, who goes there that night, and we see some like pictures and body cam footage and things like that that we have seen throughout this whole doc. And the dad is said to be covered in blood, and he's like got a rag to his face. And then there's a wall where like I'm assuming he probably was like touching his face and then touched his wall or something
Hmm.
because there's like a splat of blood. But when they went out there and they went with, the canines and stuff, they did find 2 things that they took for evidence. They found zip ties and duct tape. The family had seen that he was wearing all black, But unfortunately, he basically disappeared because he went into like a wooded area. So the scent,
Mhm.
there's going to be so much that the dogs are going to pick up on.
There are these like massive, like not massive, but there are these like rolling hills that are right
Y-
behind that neighborhood,
uh-huh.
and there are
Uh-huh.
hiking trails in them.
Oh, yeah. You're going to
So
have so many scent, like so many
yeah,
people, animals. Yeah.
there's a trail right behind their fence, like you can see in the show. But then you
Uh-huh.
like, if you look kind of up past the house, like they show in some shots, like the hill, they're like hiking trails and people ride
Right.
bikes. I've gone up there to watch on like the 4th of July to watch fireworks. So it's
Mhm.
really like a heavy trafficked area. So it wouldn't
Yeah.
be like, oh my God, a boot print. It would be
Right.
like,
It's not, yeah,
Luke's
it's not
boot
like
print.
it's some random place where they would have been like,
Right.
it's just him.
Right. So
Oh,
many
poor
people.
doggies. But the daughter tells the police something huge for this that helps so much.
Hmm.
And she tells them, hey, there's a cell phone on the counter in the kitchen. I think he left it because, like, it's none of ours. And then when I watched that in my head, I thought of Pretty Woman when she's like, big mistake, huge. And I was like, it's happening, motherfucker. Because really, this is how I
It's
find out about him.
It's so like in this moment, like you're like, holy shit. Cause like our phones connect us
Yes,
to everything, like
everything.
every day.
Yeah.
And even in 2015, our bank apps were on phones, everything, like social media. If they had gotten into it and he had that on his phone, super
Mhm.
easy to find out who he is.
Well, yeah, shit. You could even go as far as like go to their recent call list and call one of the contacts and ask whose phone this is. Like,
Right.
so easy, which kind of is what happens. So enter Lieutenant Miguel Campos. Him and Dublin PD immediately look into who owned the cell phone, who was like the subscriber of it, right?
Hmm.
And he finds the information on this lady and calls her, and she answers. And they don't want to come across like anything's wrong because they don't know who this is. And they're like, hey, we found this phone. We're just trying to like track it back to whoever it said, like, you were the subscriber. And she's like, oh, yeah, that's my son. And she tells them that his name is Matthew Muller. And Matthew is a former Marine with his dates of service from 1995 to 1999. And then he also popped up as a graduate from Harvard Law School in 2009. And they also found other things that are like the complete opposite of that, because I was like, oh my God, the whiplash when they're getting this info on him. You know what I
Right.
mean? They found some previous reports connected to him where he was a person of interest or a suspect in cases of sexual batteries and also attempted rapes. So, with all of that, Lieutenant Campos, him and his team know they have to play it really carefully. So he says, hey, we want to give his phone back to him, whatever. Do you know where he is? We could drop it off to him. And she's like, actually, yes, I do. So mom tells all the things and says that he's at her cabin in South Lake Tahoe, which from Dublin is, they said, 140 miles. So they go and they're just so on it. They are so on it. They are like, bet,
Mhm.
we're going to show up. They park like away from the cabin and they're like, we're going to walk down. So he doesn't hear us. So he can't, run away. And
Mhm.
so they're walking into it, and then there's like bam, and then they go in and they're like yelling, search warrant, da 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 da. I'm just like, holy shit, this is like so scary right now. But I do have to mention somebody before we get into what happens with that, because we get the true hero of this whole
Mhm.
documentary, the true
Yes.
motherfucking hero, and that's Sergeant Misty Kara Usu. I love her so much. I love her so much. I'm going to say it 500 times. Love her.
Mhm.
So she's a brand new detective at this point. She gets a call from her sergeant. They ask if she wants to go. And she's like, oh, hell yeah, I want to go. Because she tells us that this was actually her first case after making detective.
Mhm.
So she's like, I mean, yeah, I would be the same way. I'd be like, fuck yeah, I'm getting this exciting thing right now. Let's go do this search warrant. I'm coming. And there's more connections I will get into later as well. They all go. They get there. Like I said, they do their little walkie walk, bust in. And we get the body cam POV from all of this. And, they're talking about like, we had no idea what to expect. We didn't know if he'd be barricaded, if he even knew we were coming, all of that. Right.
Mhm.
So once they get in, they start immediately clearing the house, making sure they get all of the exits so they can arrest Matthew. And they find him and they cuff him, I think in the kitchen or something like that. You can tell even in that little like quick clip, but Sergeant Misty, as I'm going to call her, says he was very calm. He had no emotions and he just looked like a normal guy. He's just chilling. Like, he's being
Mhm.
compliant. There's no fight, no nothing. She was like, so that's weird. And if you haven't watched this, he's just like he's just like a typical white guy that you would think
Mhm.
of. I mean, he's white, he's slender, he's got brown, I think brown eyes, brown hair,
Mhm.
he's clean cut. So, nothing crazy.
Right, which was if someone had seen him, it would have just been like, "That's such a vague description of someone."
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah. It's really interesting with this man because he's so calm all the time, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"He's a sociopath."
You're fucking scary.
Right? Like, the fact that you're
Well,
this calm, okay.
yeah, and that's, like, what she was saying too. She's just like, "It was just, like, weird," basically, and I'm like, "Well, yeah, I would think that was fucking weird too." They do that, and we see more of the cabin and stuff, and it's really messy. There's stuff everywhere, there's trash everywhere. She describes it as smelling stale. Nothing was
Mm,
open, there was no fresh air coming through at all.
right.
But, like, what they found a list of interesting stuff at this cabin, so we're gonna talk about that, and I'm laughing because of only one thing, and I know you know what I'm, like, thinking of, but we'll get into this. So, okay, first they find zip ties and duct tape, which match exactly with the Dublin house. But next they find toy guns, or they're later revealed as water guns. So keep that in mind as well. They were painted to look real and like
Mhm.
kind of scuffed up and, things like that. So it looked like an actual gun. One had a laser attached to it with like duct tape and stuff. And they're like, oh my gosh, here's that weapon, quote, quote, that he had that woke the parents up with, because they said we woke up to a laser in our face. The windows were covered all in the cabin, and that's when Sergeant Misty, she's like, there's more going on here, because like the bedroom was gross. There was like paper towels and tissues and like trash and like all this other stuff. So she's like, no, no, no,
Ocean.
no. It is not just this one house. There's other shit, and we're gonna find out. And that's what we need in law enforcement. Then they go into the bathroom with more huge red flags, and they find a bottle of NyQuil and a syringe in there. So they're like, oh, okay. They're like, back this shit up. Like, oh, okay, we're finding more than we thought we were going to.
I know Lieutenant Miguel was
Uh,
like, "It's a little disturbing," and you're like, "A
yeah.
little disturbing? You
Oh
have a
my
mystery syringe?
Oh
Hmm."
my god, poor guy. He's so creeped out and disturbed by this whole thing. I like him
Mhm.
too. I like him too.
Dublin
I have a
PD for the win
yeah,
on this case, for reals, and
truly.
Dublin is not like a crazy town, if you get my drift. So
Right.
a lot of police officers can become really complacent in
Complacent.
places where
Mhm.
like you may have a drug bust or two a year. There are some like weird parts of town, but like for the most part, it's like
Pretty
sandwiched
chill.
between like a really upscale town and then like
Mhm.
business parks. So
Right. Also, so when they go outside, they find a stolen vehicle, which wouldn't you know is a white Mustang. And I'm like, "Oh
who
my
would
god,
have
who
seen this coming?
who would have thought?" I am so shocked.
Shucka.
Well, his passport was in it, and there was a GPS built into the said Mustang, and it had a bunch of addresses that he had recently been to. And these were included places such as Bishop, Menlo Park, Corona, which are all in California, Vegas, which we know is like Nevada, right next door. And then, wouldn't you know, Huntington Beach. More than one address in Huntington Beach. Where have we heard about that before? I wonder.
Especially because it's like Utica Avenue. I was like,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, literally."
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And then we get a jump scare with the car because they find what looked like one of those big
Sorry.
green oh, you're okay. One of those big green military like duffel bags, but that's not the
Mhm.
interesting part.
Mm-mm.
If you want to say that descriptor for it. The interesting part was he's like, you look into this bag and it looks like it's a torso dressed in black. So they think they're going to find a body for a second, but don't fret, they don't. It was a blow up doll, and it was made to look like an actual human body. It was like
Mhm.
clothed. It had an extra like mask on its face. It was just creepy. And that's when I wrote it down. I was like, Lieutenant Campos was even like, this is creepy. Cause I'm like, yes, it
Yeah.
is. Like, ew.
'Cause
But
how
yeah,
do you explain why you have a blow-up doll that looks like it's in tactical gear that, like, is
like a
this
dead body,
the other people, or is this, like, your practice run?
right? Ew. They also find, and this is probably the most important thing that they find as far as Denise's case goes is they find a nylon belt with a pair of swim goggles, just like that happened to her and him and Aaron and everybody else that we find out about. And they find a strand of blonde hair. And their victims, none of them had blonde hair. So Sergeant Misty is like, oh my God, there's another victim of his out there. Because it wasn't just like, oh, a hair had fell out. Like, I think it probably had like the follicle because they were like, no, we know it wasn't there by choice type of thing. So they're like, what the fuck is this? But now we go back to Denise. It's June 2015. And understandably so. She says that at this time she feels really lost and afraid because they, at this point, didn't know what was going to happen with this hoax allegations, right? Because nobody knows about what Dublin PD has just found right at this second. So they're like, are we going to get arrested? Are we going to go to prison? Like, this is such bullshit because they're not lying. It's completely ruined their lives because of how widespread it was. They weren't even staying at either, like, at their home or anything. They were staying with their family or they were staying with friends. So they were like couch surfing basically. And they couldn't go back to work because everybody knew who they were. I wouldn't be surprised if they were put on like admin leave or something like that, you know, during all of this. Their lives, like, there was nothing they could do really. So I can't imagine. Especially thinking, am I going to have to live the rest of my life like that? That would be so awful.
Right? Andrea, who's his ex, works there. And she
Mm-hmm.
probably went and told people like, oh, I got called down. I had to like
Oh,
be
you know,
interviewed,
probably
blah, blah,
did.
blah. And I mean, that's
Uh-huh.
all like, that's just an alleged. I don't know if she did it, but like, that's just human nature is to be like, oh, I got gossip. Like, yeah.
Right. Well, shoot, even let's just play devil's advocate for a second. Even being as innocent with it as being like, holy shit, Denise is missing. I had to go down the police station because they wanted to
Right.
ask me about Aaron. Like, you know, I don't obviously know anything about that woman besides she cheated on Aaron. So who the fuck knows? But, you know, it wasn't going to be no secret. It was national news. Like, it, you know, so many
It's
people knew
true.
about this case. So yeah, awful. But she talks about like, you know, they start getting death threats from people or people being like, you should have died or you deserve to die. And like all this hate because the general public all thinks, you know, what the media is saying is true and that they made this up. But she
Right.
says it. She says it time and time again. She's like, what? There was nothing. What was there? What was I going to gain from that? What were we going to get out of this? Like, there's nothing for us. There's nothing. There's no motivation for me to do this. Why would I make this up? And it's like, really, any sane person like would never make anything up like that, you know? Pretty much at this point, they're just at a standstill. Their legal teams are still trying to push on the authorities, but of course, they're just being like, we'll get to it. I don't know. But like, they're full of shit. So who fucking cares? That's kind of where they're at. And speaking of tea, Jess teased about this on the previous episode, but we find out something that our least favorite FBI agent, David Sesma, dated Andrea.
What a weird
Aaron.
conflict of interest.
Oh my God. Who was the intended target? And I have a theory that, and this is all my own opinion, this is not fact or anything and not an allegation, but I feel like he set it up with Matthew so he could come in and be the hero and get like a promotion or something. But then this just all backfired on his ass because he took the wrong person. That's just kind of how I feel.
Oh,
Because somebody hired him
true.
and Andrea was the target.
I honestly, really, truly am like, how are you on this case?
Oh,
Like,
well, I'll tell you why, because here's the reason why. So Doug, when he finds out, he's like, excuse me, what the actual fuck? So he's like, bloop, 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 let me get on my laptop. And he contacts the inspector general and they tell him, and he reads it. He still has the email. He read it. He said, the appropriate authorities found his conduct unproblematic. But let me tell you what it really is. It's welcome to the good old boys club. That's what it is. That's
right.
why he stayed on it.
I don't know. I mean, the only thing is like if David never interviewed Andrea, but it's still a huge conflict of interest because let's just say that David is the ex before Andrea and Aaron got together, right? And then let's say it's some crazy thing happened with them. Now, David could be mad at Aaron just because this is his like ex's ex and be like, whatever, you stole her from me, or I'm not over her, like whatever that was. But then like flip it, or like also it's like he could be trying to punish Andrea
Yeah.
as well by punishing Aaron.
There's so many possibilities with it and so many what ifs. And I will go as far to argue, like, it doesn't matter if he interviewed her or not. He still
Mhm.
obviously would have influence over this case and how it was
Right.
conducted. So really, that's horseshit. And that's what I'm saying. It's horseshit. That's really it. That's what it is. But we're going to go back to Dublin for a minute. Our girl, Sergeant Misty, is not letting this shit go. So she starts looking him up and looking up all these incidences that, pop up when they searched him or whatever, right? And an important one that was linked to him first, or that she discovered first, was one that happened in Palo Alto in 2009. And Palo Alto's like 40 minutes or 40 miles from her location. So she calls the detective down there and starts telling him, hey, I'm so and so, here's all this, blah, blah, blah. But
Mhm.
he stops her. And at first, I'm like, I mean, I know what happened, but when I watched it the first time, I was like, oh, great. Is this guy going to just be like, I don't know what you're talking about, shut the fuck up, like something like that? Because that's kind of our theme in this fucking documentary. But no, he is like, you know what? I know exactly who you're talking about. I have had his picture on my desk the last 6 years because now it's 2015. He's like, I know exactly who he is because he's the guy on this case that I was like, this case that we're talking about that I had. And I just had no way to prove it, but I know it's
Right.
him. So she's like, holy shit. So in that case, what happened was the victim was a 32-year-old woman who woke up at 3:30 to a man, aka him, in black clothing. I guess I should say alleged, whatever. He tied
Mhm.
her up. He forced her to drink. You can guess what it was. NyQuil. And he didn't use goggles, but he put surgical tape over her eyes. It is said that she began to beg him to not do this because she had been a victim of rape before, and that he kind of like got quiet for a minute. And then he says to her, I don't want to re victimize you. And then he just leaves her. He doesn't do anything to her. He doesn't take her, nothing. He just leaves.
So weird.
Right. So weird. So there's no prints, there's no DNA evidence, nothing like that at the scene. Reason why he was a person of interest was because 3 weeks prior, he had been stopped by a different Palo Alto police officer because he was being sketchy as fuck and coming, like jumping out of the bushes next to this apartment complex. And they're
Mhm.
like, the fuck you doing, buddy? We'll find out later what he was doing. But they were just like, what the hell? But nothing came of it because, no evidence. There was no mention of the goggles, like I said. So Sergeant Misty was like, well, this isn't that victim. There's somebody else. I got to keep looking. And we learn a bit more about her. And the whole reason that she became a police officer was because one of her friends ended up being a victim of sexual assault. And she said, she wanted to be the voice for victims and prosecute these people that do these horrible things. And I was just like, oh my God, I want to hug you so much because you're
I
so
know.
great.
I keep thinking, I was like, I am so close to Dublin. Like, I'm like, I love
Right.
her. She's
I
so
know.
it's so rare. Like, oftentimes people think that like I am like anti-police because I take such hard stances on this podcast. I'm anti-shitty police, like
Yeah.
for sure. But I also think people like Sergeant Misty should get like an award or
Mhm.
like,
Absolutely.
and I'm very at this moment, I'm very in this story, I'm very pleased with the Dublin Police Department.
Mhm.
Just A pluses all around.
For sure. And so, like I said, she's not quitting. She keeps going. She keeps going. And she finds another case from 2009 that took place less than 10 miles from the Palo Alto victim in a town called Mountain View. And this victim, she's actually on the documentary. So this woman's name is Tracy, and she tells us that during 2009, she was in her 30s. She was dating someone, but she was living alone and all of that. And the night of her attack, she woke up to a man breaking in at 4:30 a.m. and she started screaming as, proper reaction. And the guy goes, Tracy, 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 it's okay, like trying to calm her down and calling her by
Mhm.
name. He told her that she needed to stop screaming or he was going to have to gag her. So she stops, obviously. And he restrained her with zip ties and then had her drink something that made her sleepy, were her words, but obviously NyQuil. And then she said she was blindfolded with blacked out swim goggles. Sounds familiar.
Right.
I'm like, he is a creature of habit. And Tracy says that he says to her, well, now I have some bad news. Unfortunately, now I'm going to have to rape you. And she says she just immediately went into a panic and is like, please, 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 like, please don't do this. Like, you don't have to do this. You can go. Like, I won't say anything. And then he starts telling her, maybe you should get a dog, because if you have a dog, that's kind of a deterrent and this kind of thing won't happen to you again. You should probably get some kind of home protection type of thing. And then he just like leaves.
So weird.
It's so weird. I'm like, are you trying to tell these people these like tips so you feel better about whatever, if you have any guilt for this? Because I obviously we don't know if he does or not, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
It's
it's so weird.
it's so weird because typically, like, serial sexual like, rapists,
They
their
don't care.
jolly that they get off on is hurting people and, like, taking something by force. So, this is such a unique case because here you have this serial rapist or someone who is attempting to be a serial rapist, because we don't know at this point, the only victim that we know that he has actually sexually assaulted is Denise, and I'm sure there's other victims out there we just don't know about. It's like, as soon as someone is like, "No, no, 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 please not me," he's like, "Okay, I'm leaving. I don't wanna do this." So it's, like, such a conflict.
Yeah.
That's what makes him so, like, I don't wanna use the word fascinating, but it's, like, so
Unique.
yeah,
A
so it's
unique
like,
suspect. Yeah.
yeah, because it's, like, the question is, like, why did he stop? Like, because
Right.
that's typically not what we see in people like serial sexual assaulters, that nothing
Exactly.
really deters them.
Right.
And suddenly just a woman asking or saying, "I've been assaulted before," or just being like, "Please don't do this." And he's like, "Okay, changed my mind. I'm leaving."
Right? It's
Yeah.
so weird. It's so weird. So, this is not gonna surprise anybody, but the cops don't believe her. The responding officer actually asks her if maybe, "Are you sure you didn't have a nightmare?" And she, if you remember, had been zip tied. So she's like, no. And for those who can't see or are listening to audio, I'm like showing my wrists. She showed her
Mhm.
wrists and is like, no, this really happened. Because if this was a nightmare, where did these marks and stuff come from? Like, riddle me that, sir. And it was just so gross, so similar to Denise.
Mhm.
They started doing the character questioning and stuff. They reached out to her boyfriend, they talked to him, and they were like, is she attention seeking? Does she have a history of making things up? You know, stuff like that. And it was just so gross. And they would not believe her at all. So nothing happened with that one. But we go back to Denise. And at this time, she talks about her past sexual trauma that she
Mhm.
experienced. She was assaulted for the first time at the age of 12. And she talks about how she didn't say anything and felt so much guilt because just 2 years later, another girl was assaulted by the same person, and in that moment, I was, like, crying because Bug
Mhm.
is 12, for 1,
Right.
and 2, I'm just like, "Oh my gosh." I can sympathize as a victim, and I know you can too, but it's, like, on the flip side, as, like, an adult, you know, looking and hearing about this, you're like, "You were a kid, like, it's not your fault." You know what I mean? Like, kids aren't gonna know how to handle these situations because this is severe trauma, you know? So it broke my heart so much. I wanted to reach through and just hug her
Oh, for
in
sure.
this moment.
And it's one of those things when you're a child, like, most of the time, the person who is assaulting you is a person of power in your life. You
Mhm,
know, there are instances where it's maybe someone who's, like, equal to you, like another kid or another person, but typically it's
mhm.
someone who has some sort of authority over you that can, like, command that fear. It's a whole other layer than just, like, when she's saying, like, "I didn't say anything," it's like, well, where were you at in your mental space thinking, like, "What happens if I tell? Like, what
Yeah,
happens to me? What happens to this person?" And people make
it's
the best
just so
decisions with
hard.
the information that they have in their head, and sometimes it's like, "I should just be quiet."
Yeah. And then when she was 19, she was raped at a house party and she decided this time I'm going to do something about it. So she went to report it at the police station and the officer she talked to said she said talked her out of it. Again, here we are. Like, it's so common. I don't even want to know how many cases a day where these law enforcement officers aren't believing these victims. It's just disgusting. It's just
That's
so
why people don't come
disgusting.
forward because the
Exactly.
f the person that they're coming to for help, the person in their vulnerable state where they're like, "Somebody has hurt me," is just like, "Do you really think you wanna go down this?" There's a lot of this it's not even
Mhm.
like that they don't believe them. It's basically being like, well, I believe you, but like it's gonna be
No,
a
they
long
don't.
road. Well, you know what I'm
No, they
saying. Like,
don't. No, they don't. As someone who's been on the receiving end of this, if they did, they wouldn't be being like, we better not. It's gonna be really inconvenient for you because, like you're saying, it's gonna take
mhm,
blah 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 time, like,
right.
But at the end of the day, they don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck, and it's disgusting and it's vile. And I hope everybody who's been doing this all rot in hell, whether you're on this case or somewhere else in the world. And especially in a case like this, he could have been caught with a lot of these.
Oh, for sure.
Like, they could have prevented so many, and that's what's so disgusting and vile, and I'm just like, trash. It's crazy to me because it's like, she's already went through that on a smaller, like, not diminishing what happened to her, but, on a
Mhm,
smaller, less public scale, and then now
right.
she's going through it again?
And she's
My
and
god.
and not only is the police not believing her, they're like making
Trying
her
to
to be the criminal.
Mhm, mhm. Gross. So, Sergeant Misty still trucking along. She's our girl. We know this. Now, she's like, "I am not quitting until I know who this blonde hair belongs to. I don't give a shit. I'm gonna keep going." So now she's like, well, at that moment, she's ran out of cases linked to Matthew. So she's like, "Let's look at this Mustang." So
Mhm,
she finds out who the owner is, or like who registered it, and she found out that it was stolen 7 months prior from Vallejo. So she's like, "Let me give them a call." So she calls the guy who's the registered owner, and he's like, "Oh, yeah." He confirmed someone fucking stole it. She mentions to him like, "Yeah, we have it because it was involved with a home invasion." And he's like, "Hey, have you ever heard of the Mare Island Creeper?" And she's like, "Why, no, I have not. Who is this? What is that?"
right?
And basically, he tells her so much. Like, I feel like this guy, he helped a lot too. He says
Gold
so much stuff.
star.
Yes.
Gold star
Gold
for the
star to
show.
you, private
Yeah.
citizen. So he tells her that there was reports of a male going around on Mare Island and being a creepy peeping Tom in 2014, and he was taking pictures and then he would like run away, and he was targeting college students. And big surprise, Vallejo PD did nothing and didn't really care. Who's shocked? No one. But shout out to a few of the students that were dealing with his creepy ass. They're
Mhm,
like, "Let's handle this. Let's just take matters into our own hands." That's not safe. Don't do that. But like,
mm-mm.
also, I'm also cheering for you because it's like, again, the police
Right.
is useless at this point. So they end up following him home, finding out where he lived. He lived there in Mare Island. I'm assuming because they had like his address and stuff, and who knows like how far they went, but they ended up finding out about his ex-military service, and then they found out he was a lawyer. Who
Wonder
else
who
has
that could
these two
be.
things? Yeah, so she obviously connects the dots, and she's like, "Holy fuck, this is all
Mhm.
connected." So, what's also frustrating but not surprising is it's mentioned that Vallejo PD did have leads, they just didn't care. They just didn't do anything. They had
These
leads.
students
He was one of those
literally
leads.
followed him back to his house
Yeah.
and was like,
They didn't care.
"This is the dude snapping pictures in our window. This is where he lives. We watched
Mhm,
him walk in. We know it's him."
mhm,
And Vallejo police was like, "I don't know who this is." Like, I
mhm.
just at this point, I just feel like Vallejo PD just like is a building full of air. Like,
Clueless people.
what's
Yeah,
happening in there?
right?
Like a citizen is coming up to you and is being like, "I caught this guy peeping in my window. I followed him home. Here's his address. Here's his name. This is his history. This is what he does.
No
Go get
excuse.
him."
Like,
And they were like, "Well, we have to we have to go do other things. It's
we have to go stick
cheese
our
dip
thumbs
day."
up
I don't
each
know. That's just literally what I
I was
think.
gonna
You're
say,
like,
stick their thumbs up each other's asses. Like, what the fuck?
like, how is there no one at the like, this isn't just Matt Mustard. This isn't just Andrew Badillo or whatever his name is.
It's the
This is like
whole
all of the
department.
this is the whole police department that's just incompetent. It's like people were like, "Oh, you." This is how I feel. Like I feel like people who like barely pass their
I was about to say
like
that.
their exams. What?
I was about to say that, "Oh, you guys scrape by to pass? You're going
And
to
they're like,
Vallejo." Like,
right, they're like, "Oh, you barely could become a cop. Go to Vallejo." They have zero track record of catching bad guys. They let the Zodiac go. They let Mare Island Creeper go. Like this is how easy would have this case been? It would have been a big layup. You know, when police departments bust something that's like ongoing, they can apply for grants to get them more like tactical gear. They can get things like
Yep.
that. Something this easy of a fucking layup could have gotten their department like more funding. They could have gotten better cars. They could have gotten more people. Like, let's say like give them the benefit of the doubt that they're understaffed. Something like this could have gotten them more money to
More
hire
staff.
more staff. It was like Vallejo police are like, well, I don't actually want to do my job. I just kind of want to like wear the uniform. Like that's the whole feel is just like
That's the
I
vibes.
only wanted to be a cop so I could have a gun. Like that's how it
Yeah.
feels.
Well, someone more useful, this, Mustang owner, he
Random
says,
citizen of
"Random
Vallejo.
citizen." Love it. You get a gold star random citizen. So, he says, "You know what else I thought about that's kinda weird? So, the Mare Island Creeper stopped being a creeper around March of 2015, and wouldn't you know, that was around the same time as the Gone Girl case," and asked if she had heard about this one, and she hadn't. So he tells her a little bit, and then she starts doing her own research on it. And then this is how she finds out who Denise is. And
Mhm.
she starts connecting the dots because we remember the GPS had the address in it, the
Mhm.
in Huntington Beach. And she looks up pictures of Denise. The blonde hair is the same type of shade and
Mhm.
similar length than what she has in her photos. What that,
Mhm.
like these are not coincidences. And she's like, when she came to the realization, being like, holy shit, this is Denise's hair, she said she wanted to just reach through the computer because she went and read everything. She read all
Mhm.
of the like early reporting, all of the hoax reporting, like she read everything she could. I'm just like, oh my God. Cause she's like, I got you. Like, she's like, I just want to reach through and hug her and say, I got you, Denise.
I
And I was just like,
know.
yeah, you do.
Good
Like
job.
crying.
Good job, Sergeant Misty. Like, I just am
Oh,
like, how is this woman not running the world? Like,
literally.
she's too good for for this.
I know. So, no surprise. She's like, "Let me call up Vallejo PD because I don't know their
Mhm.
trash at this point." So she calls them and she's like, "No one will call me back. No one will answer me." She's like, "So I'm like an annoying ex-girlfriend and I just keep calling and won't go away." And I'm like,
I loved
"Yes."
this segment because it's like literally they just film her doing like random tasks like cooking
And
dinner, doing the laundry, sitting on her
yeah,
stairs. And I was like, you call them, you get them. And I was like,
hell yeah. It's like
from
the reenactment of her like in her house, but it's like her. So it's just
right.
even better.
It's yeah, I loved it. From like one law enforcement to another, don't you like owe them like, hey, this person is calling because they have like information that could like help them? And I
Trying to just
guarantee you what happened was they listened to that voicemail that she left and was like, hi, I have information about the like Denise Huskins case. And they were like,
Mhm.
delete. Because I mean, this is all my own opinion and not like based on anything that I know personally, but like
But we all know everyone on there is team hoax at this point.
right, and they're like, "We can't fucking talk to Dublin PD." I would have I would not have put it past Misty to, like, drive to Vallejo and been
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"Somebody talk to me," because that's what I
Oh,
would have done. I've been like, "I crossed a bridge for this, people. Let's talk."
literally, right? I know. So eventually she does get on the phone and they're just basically like, "Oh, the FBI is investigating this, so we can't help you. You got to call them," which I feel like backs up the whole deleting voicemail thing in my opinion,
Mhm.
that backs that up. Being like, "Nope, can't talk to you. Bye." So she
Right.
calls David Sesma and she tells him that she has evidence that Matthew is connected to. She said, "I told him what you called a hoax, but that's obviously not the case, duh." And he gets defensive immediately and snaps back at her and says, "We never called it a hoax." And it's like,
No,
okay.
you let Vallejo PD call it a hoax, and
Yeah.
you didn't be like, "We're still investigating this, like, we don't know if it's a hoax or not." You just stood by and shush your face. Same
Uh-huh.
thing.
Yeah, and she knew that. So she's like, "Okay, well," she's like, "I have someone you might want to talk to." And he's like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess you could send over the stuff." Sorry, I'm not talking in an annoying voice because I hate this guy. And she's like, "I was just so disappointed." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, because you're a good cop, so you think other people are going to be good and ethical, but obviously they're not." So her and Lieutenant Campos, they set up the meeting with the FBI. They go show
Mhm.
him everything, and when they see the toy gun, he's like, "That was it. That was it," because they were like, "Oh my god, this is the same handgun that Henry, who you guys will remember is from the San Francisco Chronicle and was getting
Mhm.
like all the stuff from Matthew in his email. They're like, it's the same one. Holy shit. Then they're like, get ready, guys. And then they pull out the goggles with the blonde hair. And he said that that was when you could just see on their face genuine shock and them realizing that like in real time that they were wrong. And I'm
Also,
like,
the fact that it, like, took 2 police officers to schedule a meeting, which probably didn't it wasn't
which was
easy,
probably a
I'm
pain in the
assuming.
butt. Yeah.
Yeah, and drive, I'm assuming, to San Francisco because I believe that's where, like, the FBI agency is there. Sitting down with them and being like, "Here's all the evidence," and then they're like, "Holy shit!" Because if she had I'm so proud of Dublin PD because if they had just sent that shit over, it would have just been, like, printed off and put in a file and never looked at. The
Exactly.
FBI is supposed to be the best of the best, like, it's supposed to be the elite. Like, the people who end up at the FBI are supposed to be the elite of people, and David,
Yeah.
you didn't come through for this, you just
No.
didn't.
But it was like so this was another reason why I became like and I hope he's like we always say, hopefully he is a good person. But like this is what made me like Lieutenant Campos so much. So he's like telling the documentary people all this.
Mhm.
And he's like, yeah. And then they say like, oh, they need to investigate this further. And he's got this like smug, like, no shit you do look on his face after. And I'm just like, yes, because that would have been everybody's reaction. Like, come the fuck on, guys. Like,
But could you
Jesus.
imagine if they didn't? If they were just like, "Thank you for this information."
Those two, Misty and him, were not gonna let that go.
Oh,
So
no,
they
dog with
knew they
bone.
had to. They're like, let's see how we can backtrack now. So with all of this, the US attorney calls Doug to tell him that they've made a break in Denise's case. And of course, the media is doing a whole 180 and being like, oh my God, it wasn't a hoax. She was telling the truth. And the affidavit becomes available and they start reporting to include the assaults that she went
Mhm.
through, more details and whatnot. And the truth is slowly trickling out, right? And at this time in the episode, we learn a little more about Matthew and that he had been, not only did he just graduate from Harvard, he was also a research assistant for 3 years. And
Mhm.
from there, after he left, he went, like I mentioned, he became an immigration lawyer in San Francisco. And he was on like a news broadcast or something, like some kind of news
Mhm.
story that they showed this. And I'm just like, holy shit. This was like about like the work he was doing and things like that. And then Denise, when she saw it, she said, she heard his voice and said, there's no mistaking it was him because remember, guys, she was wearing the goggles every time. So really, the only thing she would know concretely is what his voice sounded like. So it's like everything's clicking, right? So he had been disbarred like recently, I think it was in 2014 is what they said, due
Yeah.
to lying to a client and then also fraudulently charging them, so scamming them. Now, Doug talks about the affidavit more and he's like, honestly, even in their freaking affidavit they wrote up, it's so blatantly obvious how much tunnel vision they had to just focus on Denise and Aaron
Mhm.
being the ones to blame for this. Like, there's no evidence that they looked at this from a kidnapping standpoint at all, which, we know, but still, like, he's like, damn, you even gonna admit it on paper, guys? Like, what the hell is happening? And another thing that's mentioned is Aaron's polygraph test that we talked about in episode 1.
Mhm.
So that day, if you guys need the refresher, the FBI agent had said to him that without a shadow of a doubt, he failed and he was guilty and blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't the truth. It actually came back inconclusive, which again goes with what we were saying originally about it coming
Mhm.
back, quote, quote, failed. Obviously, all the emotions, all of that, like who's surprised? Nobody. So he did lie to Aaron, of course, as a tactic to get him to, I'm assuming, crack. We've
Right.
seen this across the board. It's not illegal, but it is so unethical. And like in cases like this is gross.
Mhm.
They, of course, they also include Denise's sexual assault exam and said that there wasn't, quote, anything to show physical evidence of the sex being unconsensual, but there's so many victims out there. And she says too, like, just because there wasn't anything physically damaging doesn't mean it's not rape.
Right. And she
So
spent time telling the police, I played along.
exactly. That should have been the results they expected to come back.
It would have been weirder if it had shown, like,
Right.
because then that would have been an inconsistency. But like,
Right.
she was like, I played along because I thought I was going to die.
And it does bring up that conversation of like, the FBI knows this kind of stuff. They should know this. Why is this happening this way? Oh, and then also another thing that we find out now is that Aaron told the police, Vallejo PD, the kidnappers are supposed to call my phone back. They're going to call me on here. This is how they said they're going to reach me. Did they leave it on? No. They put it in fucking airplane mode till the next evening. And there was 2 missed calls, which, wouldn't you know, because Misty tells us, guess what? Those 2 calls were traceable, and guess where it took them? Tahoe. He had her at the cabin. They could have saved her and got her before the second assault happened.
Right. This kind of police work was like, let's do the opposite of anything.
Mm-hmm.
To not have confirmation bias, like you're supposed to do, like, even if you don't believe them, even if you're like, fuck this guy is lying, we don't believe him at all.
That's what I'm saying. It takes no effort to have a phone sit on your desk.
Mm-hmm. And just have someone, like, you could have had a low level detective, a low level person just sit there and like watch the phone for like incoming. They could have kept it in the room with them when they were interrogating Aaron. Like, it could have just been there. And the fact, like, it was like they were like, you know what? Just in case there's a kidnapper, we're going to turn this off so the kidnappers can't get a hold of us.
No, for
and
real.
I do believe this kind of like in like the theory of, you know, how you were talking earlier about like David and them like setting this up. This kind of sounds like this situation is like they were like, no, turn that phone off. Because why would you do that? Like, I have never heard of a law enforcement officer, and I might be wrong because I'm not one. I've never heard of them turning it on airplane mode while they're interrogating someone. I would just think they would leave it sitting in a desk somewhere to die. Like, why leave it on?
Right. It's so weird. Like, why are we doing all of these interesting things that y'all know better? Because we have high-ranking officers on this case. So we don't have rookies who have no idea and we're living under a rock, just saying.
I also think that rookies would probably be doing a little better because at this point they'd be like, well, I remember in training, like, we should be doing this. Like, I could understand if that phone had been taken and put it in an evidence bag and like was in a locker somewhere, like that is different. But the fact that Aaron was like, look, they're going to contact me on this phone, this one right here, you should look at it. And they were like, boop, boop, boop. It just, I'm like the whole opposite of what common sense says.
Literally, it blows my mind so much. I'm just like, this makes no sense to anyone.
I don't know if anyone's ever like blatantly been like, why did you do that? But like, how do you justify that action? If it comes back that this is a departmental like policy, be like, y'all should fucking change that.
And so eventually the FBI calls them and says, we're positive Matthew worked alone. There's no other kidnappers. And then we jump over to Henry for a second. And I do appreciate this because he does say he does regret how he handled his coverage on this case. And I really hope that this was a learning opportunity for other reporters as well who may have participated. We know Nancy Grace don't give a shit, but other people, you know, just have to say being a good person should be more important than being like the first one to say whatever bullshit. Just saying.
Also, like, if you're wrong, you have to walk that back. Like, if you come out and you're like, hey, we reported, like, and they didn't, by the way, they didn't. They just kind of were like, what was once thought to be a hoax is not, they're not like coming out and being like, we're really sorry for the damage that we did to this couple. We're taking responsible for jumping the gun because the police had given us this information. No, they just fucking were like, okay, well, whatever.
With it. Yeah, well, and that's the thing too. It's not even hindsight at this point talking. It's looking at the facts. There was red flags everywhere with this whole damn situation. Like,
and at the end of the day, like, it's the media's responsibility to correct news, like to tell the truth. And it's the police's responsibility to run an investigation against, even if they're like personally, like, I don't believe this is true. It's their responsibility to do that investigation the way the crime is being reported.
Yeah.
You know, like someone's like, my girlfriend is kidnapped. You run the investigation like someone's being kidnapped. Not like some guy has killed his wife and like, or his girlfriend. And then that's how they ran the investigation. is that he
Mhm.
killed her. And then as soon as they were like, oh, she's alive, just kidding. This is a hoax. And she was in on, like, you guys were in on this. Like, how fucking lazy cops are you? I don't even care. Like, at this point, I'm just so disappointed in the fact that
Yeah.
like these are people who people trust. Like
Yeah.
when their house is broken into, when their car gets stolen, when someone's peeping in their window, that they're calling to help them. And what's really happening is they're just being ignored. And I hope, dear God, I hope that since this happened, that the Vallejo police have taken a long look inside and made some changes. I don't think that they have. I really
We can
hope that
hope.
they do. Like that, or
Yeah, we
that's,
can hope.
that something has changed.
Yeah. Or hopefully at least with like the exposure from the documentary itself,
Oh, yeah.
So jump to March 2017, Matthew is sentenced, and this is another part where I was crying. So Denise does the bravest thing you can do as a victim. She
Mhm.
and Aaron go to court on the day of his sentencing. She gets up, makes eye contact with him, and addresses him directly. And she says, Matthew Mueller, now we meet face to face, eye to eye. I'm Denise Huskins, the woman behind the blindfold. Because she was like, he went this whole time without seeing me. So I was making sure he was going to fucking see me without
Right.
any damn choice. And I'm like, yes, go Denise. So Matthew was sentenced to a total of 40 years in prison for kidnap, robbery, and rape. He was not charged for the attempted rapes in Palo Alto and Mountain View or for any of the peeping Tom incidents from Mare Island. And he never told anyone why Andrea was the intended target or if anybody who hired him. He never spoke on any of that. So that is
Mhm.
left for the universe, I guess. And so then to kind of like ping pong just a tiny bit. So in 2016, Aaron and Denise sued the city of Vallejo for defamation, as they should, and they were awarded $2.5 million. I feel like that check should have been a lot more hefty
They
for
settled out of
everything they went
court.
through.
I think if they had
True,
gone to
but still.
court, they probably would have gotten more. But
Yeah.
I can
But
see
that's
that.
so why would you want to traumatize yourself again? You know what I
Right.
mean?
I could see they're just
So
like, you know what, $2.5 million. Like we were talking about,
that's still a lot
like
of money.
yeah, we were talking about in an earlier episode where we were like $15,000 is life changing money for people. Like two
Sure.
point five
Yeah.
million dollars, it's like they could, I mean, it's changed their life, and they
Oh
can,
yeah.
and it's never gonna like wipe away what Vallejo PD did.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just saying they deserve everything.
Oh,
They
they
deserve
do.
more. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, no, they totally do. But I get why
Yeah,
they were like, "Nah, I don't wanna, like, go to court and redo this."
right. And then they squeeze in a quick clip that of a deposition of Andrew Badu, the chief of Vallejo PD, because during all of this, a tip came in that he told our other least favorite person, Lieutenant Kenny, to quote, burn that bitch, meaning Denise. And Andrew, if you watch this at the end, you see he's so strategic and probably media trained as well,
Mhm.
because when he's asked if he said that, he doesn't say no. He says, quote, he never heard anyone say that. He didn't say, I didn't say that. He just said he never heard anyone say that. So there's that petty
Mhm.
point I had to say. And that tells us all we know. And we're not shocked that the chief at this station is like this, right? So again, no shock. None of the other officers involved were disciplined in any way. They were actually rewarded. So Jessica mentioned this in episode 2 when we kind of looked up what has happened with this guy since then. Detective Mustard was awarded Officer of the Year in 2015. And
How?
I don't
What
know.
the fuck else did he do that year that was so good that this didn't, like,
Take that away for a different
'cause,
candidate? I don't
I mean,
know.
they knew in, like, July, August of that year that
Mhm.
they were wrong. Like, it wasn't like we're not talking they found this out in 2016. We're talking they found this out in 2015, and then in
Right.
December, they were like, "You know who's a really good detective? Detective Mustard. Let's give him an award. He's officer of the year." He's not the officer of anything, like, anything of the year,
No.
like, maybe douchebag of the year,
Mm.
come
Yeah.
on. This just said to me that they were doubling down and being like, "We believe our officers did the right thing," and this was
Oh,
their
for
way of
sure.
showing that, and that
Mhm.
even, like, Mustard hadn't done anything to deserve it. They were just being like, "We're gonna make sure that people think that he's a good officer," because it sets up for, like, when they go to court, if Denise and Aaron take him to court, he's a decorated officer. He's won awards for his ability to serve the community.
They're trying to beef up his character. Yeah.
Gross. He's gross.
So end of 2017, Sergeant Misty finally gets to meet Denise and Aaron. And it's just it sounds like such a beautiful thing and such a good thing that they all got to finally meet. And then, they got their settlement or whatever. They were able to relocate to the coast. And between then and now, their life update is they are still together. They got married and they have the cutest 2 daughters ever. They do this little family like shot on the beach, and I'm just like, I'm so happy like that they're able to have their happily ever after together with their adorable family. It's just, it makes me so fucking happy for them. I know our thoughts are very known at this point on how we feel, but I just have to say one more time, Dublin PD, I commend them so much for the tenacity and just the stubbornness of being like, no, we're sticking through it, because that's how it's supposed to be. That's how it's supposed to be. That's their job, is to protect victims, protect the public. That is their job. That is in their job description. So you know what? All I have to say besides that is fuck those officers. Fuck those FBI agents that were making Denise and Aaron's life a living hell. And I hope either our coverage, or if you've watched this, that this documentary opened your eyes and true consumers' eyes for the reality of it. Because, it's funny, we didn't plan this, but it's like the last one you recapped for us, the Mostly Harmless. It's showing us, not that totally, quote, perfect case. It's showing us how truly messed up things are. And, I know it's not like we're just like, oh, we want everyone to be held accountable because they're trash. But I'm still so happy that Denise got justice. And even though he wasn't convicted for the other victims, at least they were still able to have a voice and it be public knowledge that yeah, he's guilty, so I hope in some way that was some closure and justice for them. So last statements.
My last thought is one of the things that really kind of hit me in this last episode is that he's an immigration attorney, and that's a vulnerable he was that was what he did as an attorney. He was an immigration lawyer, and that's such a vulnerable group of people. And people who are here, they're apprehensive of law enforcement, they're apprehensive of the legal system, because we're seeing in America right now, it's not always great for people who come here seeking refuge. And I just think I started thinking today when I was getting ready and watching the show, or rewatching this episode, how many of these people did he victimize who wouldn't come forward and say anything, because he had all their information, he knew where they were, and he knew that they most likely wouldn't come forward and speak up, because that meant calling the police. That meant maybe exposing an undocumented family member. That might be exposing that their visas run out. Who knows what vulnerable person that Matthew, just for his own enjoyment, took advantage of. And I know it's conflicting, because he did these things where it was he left, but I just keep thinking there's probably people out there who are who've watched this documentary and are like, oh my God, that's the man who assaulted me, but I'm still in a place where I can't speak up because they're vulnerable, and it breaks my heart. And I am so happy for Denise and Aaron that they have this beautiful little family. And one of the things I wanted to share was a sentiment that Aaron said, was that, he says that he feels like his family's complete, and that if they're like their mother, he knows they're going to be okay. And I was this could have gone the opposite for them. This could have been they went to federal prison. They never wanted to see each other again. He could have been did she really fake it? How can I trust her? And they chose love, and they stood by each other. And I'm so happy for them, and hope all amazing things for them in the future. And just so much respect that they didn't cower when the police were we're going to charge you for this, that they stood together and said, no, fuck you. We're right. and we will be vindicated. And they were. And that it's such a fucked up thing that happened to them, but such a happy ending for them as well. So
For sure. So again, it's on Netflix. If you haven't watched it, check it out. If you have, let us know what you guys think about it. Definitely stirs up a lot of feelings. But with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
toodles.